Forge FC is ready for their upcoming match.
Simply stunning stuff. And finally, their goal. My word, what a rocket.
Now, let's get you up to date with Anthony Urciuoli and Match Day Preview on the Forge Audio Network.
Hey, Forge fans, it's the Forge Audio Network. I'm Anthony Urciuoli. This is the Match Day Preview on the official home of your reigning, defending, undisputed Canadian Premier League champions, Forge FC. And they return home this weekend, which means you can see the club live. ForgeFC.ca/tickets. Friday, 7 o'clock start time. Vancouver FC making their second trip to Hamilton to play at Tim Hortons Field. Before we talk about Vancouver, who, by the way, this is the only club in CPL history that Forge has never beaten. Surprising when you look at the overall standings. Okay, they've only played each other twice, but still kind of an interesting stat when you think about it. But okay, before we get to that, though, the other team in Vancouver, Pacific FC, going into last weekend, they were in first place. They were experiencing a slide, a huge opportunity for them to kind of right the ship against a rival, against Forge, against the evil empire that is Forge FC. And the result, a dominant statement victory for Forge FC. It was 2-0. It was never in doubt. Full control from start to finish was Forge. This wasn't Forge, going into on the road, going into Starlight Stadium, playing a Pacific team that had nothing to really play for, or was like a trap game in some way. I mean, Pacific needed that game just to kind of, again, right the ship after it looked like Pacific was going to run away with the first place title and had been on a bit of a slide. I mean, this was a huge opportunity for them at home in front of their fans, make things right. And Forge just, I mean, it wasn't even a contest. It was that dominant. And because of that, the table. Now, I will say, with that win, Forge moved into a tie for first place at the top of the table. Standings look quite a bit different now. That's what happens in this league. All it takes is one match between two clubs that are kind of in playoff contention, and all of a sudden it's a 6-point swing. All right, the Forge match was a 6-point swing, and Cavalry had a 6-point swing of their own. It's the beauty, but also the frustration of playing in an 8-team league. You're going to get these major swings, but it's what keeps things exciting, entertaining, and we are in for something of a very exciting playoff race down the stretch here, because, I mean, depending which club you look at, there's only between, 11 to 12 matches left on the season. So a lot of points to be had. But again, all these clubs are playing against each other. So you're going to be seeing these swings, and it's why points, however you get them, are so at a premium. And that's why I hate to, we're in a positive mode here, right? If for you, a Forge fan, you're in a positive headspace with the recent form that Forge has been in. But I just hope we're not looking back at those two previous matches against Vancouver FC, the last place team, the team that struggled, the team that right now has a minus 16 goal differential and is in last place. Forge has dropped 4 points against Vancouver. Right, there was a draw and there was a loss, and you hope those points don't come back to bite you. But fortunately, Forge still very much in control of their own destiny, because not only are they within striking distance of first place, again, they're playing. Everyone's playing each other, so everyone essentially is in control of their own destiny at this point. But quickly back to that Pacific game, because it was too good not to at least give the complete picture here. Kwesi Poku, David Chouanier on the score sheet, which was very nice to see from both players. It was a dominant and decisive victory. Just playing on that smaller pitch at Starlight Stadium, sometimes you wonder, a team like Forge, do they benefit from a larger pitch or a smaller pitch? When they're playing their game, I like the smaller pitch in the sense that it kind of it brings out that Bobby ball that's so exciting to watch. It's a lot of quick. It's quick passing. I mean, the ball moves faster than the player, right? And Forge took full advantage of that. It was short passes, quick passes. I mean, blink of an eye. You had, if you blinked, you missed like 4 passes. It was that kind of pace that Forge set. And when they are on, when they're feeling it, when they're feeling confident, that is what Forge looks like. It's, you and I have talked about this before. I like fluidity. I think that's the key. It's like a machine. It looks like it's automated at certain points. Just how quickly, how fluid. It's beautiful to watch. And they did it against a very good Pacific squad. So you hope there is a lot to carry over into this next match against Vancouver. On top of that, back-to-back weeks now that Forge have hit all 3 of their keys that we laid out before their matches. Going into the last match against Pacific, it was silence Saloof. Saloof, probably the he's been the biggest surprise this season for CPL fans, and not because he wasn't good coming in, but it's because the 21-year-old Dutch player, a lot of fans just weren't familiar with him, and we weren't sure what to expect, and we weren't even sure who he was, quite frankly. But he has been the engine that has driven that Pacific offense. He has been the cattle. He led the league going into that match in big chances created from all over the pitch. It wasn't just one side. It wasn't just one foot. He was a danger, and he was silenced. And that's what Forge needed. And it's also further proof. When you have a guy that drives an offense like that, and when he's held off the score sheet and that team goes scoreless in a match, it's just more evidence that he is the guy that really is behind a lot of the numbers. And he was silenced. So they hit that key. Key number 2 was to disrupt the dribble coming in. Pacific, the best, statistically anyway, the best 1v1 club in the league in terms of beating their opponents off the dribble one-on-one and getting by guys. It was disrupted. I mean, for large stretches of the match, Pacific, they barely touched the ball. So again, team defending on point, not just their one-on-one, because again, one-on-one defending, it can't, you have to be able to recognize as a teammate when help is needed and jumping in when help is needed. And it takes a team to defend. And Forge, when they're on it. They seem to go hand in hand. When the offense is going, the defense also seems to be going too. And it makes sense, right? Because these are things that are connected, because when they can possess the ball and dominate the game, they're also confident off the ball. They're aggressive. They're not second guessing. The swagger, the Forge swagger that other teams, other coaches have talked about over the years, it was on full display. So key number 2, disrupt the dribble. They did. And number 3 was still shooting. The reality was, going into that match, Forge had 30 more shots than the club with the next most shots. And that's in total on the year. And Forge, they didn't match. It was a little under their average output per match, but they didn't need it because they had a 2-goal lead fairly early, and they're able to control the match from there. They didn't have to force anything, and when they did shoot, they were efficient. So that's 3 checks. Back-to-back weeks with there was a gap. The home match against Valor, they did not get all 3 checks, but the match before that against York, when they won 4-0, they did. So the 3 checks seem to mean almost automatic victory at this point. So we're going to get to our 3 keys for this match against Vancouver. And I think it's safe to say, I mean, this is just science. If they hit all 3 keys, they win. It's that simple. All right. So Forge now this weekend, back at home, an area where improvement is needed. Dominant away squad Forge has been this season, the best away team in the league. At home, though, a lot left to be desired, and they're going to want to correct that, of course. but they're playing a club that they've never beaten. Again, they've only played them twice. But Vancouver, an expansion club, has struggled. I mean, they have 3 wins on the year. As I said earlier, minus 16 goal differential, just 13 points on the season. But they've picked up 4 out of a possible 6 points against Forge this season somehow. And so this is an opportunity for Forge to make, speaking of making a statement, this is one of those no mercy kind of games, if you know what I mean. I mean, you kind of have to, after giving away points against a club like Vancouver, it'll feel good to with all due respect to the expansion club, bury them in this one. Looking at the overall table going into this match, Forge FC in 3rd place. They are tied with Pacific in that spot. They are 1 point behind Cavalry, but they are giving up a game in hand against Cavalry and Pacific. Vancouver, as mentioned, dead last with 13 points, and they are 9 points out of the 5th and final playoff spot, which is currently held by Halifax. By the way, I'm a little surprised Ottawa is not. I hadn't really been paying attention to where they are on the table, but I feel like I've just been seeing Ottawa winning constantly. They've won 3 out of the last 4. They had to draw their last match, but I mean, they've picked up 10 out of a possible 12 points the last 4 matches, but they're still in 6th place. So that just goes to show you that this league, it's so hard to gain ground sometimes because everyone's playing each other. You need the right teams to beat the right teams, and sometimes teams draw, and then you're back even because 2 teams ahead of you both got points. So it's an interesting league, but that's surprising. And I will point out Valor, who's in 2nd last, they're only 3 points better than Vancouver. And Valor stole a point in Hamilton 2 weekends ago. So, yeah, Forge have to be better at home. Their home record right now is 5th best in the CPL. They have just 10 points in 8 matches, just 2 wins this year at home. That is something they are going to want to correct as soon as possible. Away from home, not surprisingly, Vancouver is dead last. As a road club, they have just 1 win this season in 8 tries on the road. Head-to-head, we've talked about that. Valor, 1 win, 1 draw against Forge so far. They played to a scoreless draw in Hamilton back in May. And then Forge lost at Vancouver on June 20th. So this is the last meeting. There's also a meeting on September 3rd, so not the last meeting. They will play 2 more times this season, with this next one, the 3rd of 4. Okay, we got some key insights here. Yeah, and just kind of proves more of what we're saying. Vancouver ranks 7th in goals scored, 0.9 per match. They've also conceded the most penalties this season. They've given up 3. So taking fouls, which if they're defending a lot, makes sense that they're giving up fouls in the area. And they haven't kept a clean sheet in 5 matches. Forge, on the flip side, lead the league, tied for the lead actually in clean sheets with 6. Thank you, Tristan Henry, and the squad as a whole. But of course, the keeper gets most of the glory when there's a clean sheet. And Taryn Campbell comes into this match tied at the top of the scoring leader bracket, if you want to call it that. Taryn Campbell with 8 goals on the season. Everyone kind of uses their own, I don't know, however you follow your soccer scores and standings and all those kinds of things. But SofaScore is one of the more popular ones, and they do their own player ratings where, I mean, essentially, if you're not familiar with player ratings, there are a lot of different ways, a lot of different formulas, but essentially when you do something positive to help your club, it boosts your rating. 10's the highest. So you kind of get your rating is from 0 to 10. And depending on what you do, if complete so many passes, takeaways, tackles, assists, whatever, your goals, especially, that boosts your rating. And then when you make mistakes, giveaways, and if you're not very involved in the match, if you're not completing passes, your rating declines. So that's kind of how that's calculated. But the SofaScore ratings. Kyle Becker, number 1 in the CPL. And that is especially impressive when you consider he's not a guy that is going to show up on the score sheet necessarily, at least as a goal scorer. I mean, he's going to pile on the assists because he's, an elite playmaker. But he's not a guy that's necessarily going to lead the league in goals because that's not really his role as kind of the architect in the midfield. But to have that rating, a 7.35, and by the way, he's second place is Iman Salouf from Pacific, who we've talked about. Mandrakar James, by the way, on that list, he's 6th in the CPL, which is impressive for a defender, right? You have to do a lot of things right as a defender to end up on that list. But Kyle Becker at the top, and it's been a pleasure to watch Kyle Becker this season. Not that it hasn't been a pleasure in the past, but this season especially, his work, I don't know what is different, and maybe I'm just paying attention to it more. But the way he links plays, it's just everything he does is there is a perfection to his game where he just does everything right. And that's how you get a high rating in this sport. It's not necessarily you're scoring the most goals, but you're doing everything right. He's winning his challenges. He's completing a lot of passes. He's linking up plays. You know how dangerous he is on set pieces. He just creates constantly. And he just does it in all 3 phases of the pitch. And he does it so well. And I hope Forge fans, not to cross, I know people get annoyed when you cross sports, but, as a Bruins fan, getting the news this week that Patrice Bergeron, I see it's the same. It's like you talk about someone who just does everything right. There are no holes, no flaws. And then you don't really appreciate it necessarily until they're no longer playing. So I hope people are watching Kyle Becker and just laser focused on him. Even if you spend the entire half of a match just watching Kyle Becker play, I'm telling you, there is something so satisfying about it. And if you're a young player, if you're a parent with a child who's playing the sport, just watch Kyle Becker. Just watch everything he does. And again, Forge fans, I think we've been a little spoiled because I want you to appreciate what Kyle brings as essentially, the face of the franchise. So we know how good Kyle is. And now we move on to our team stats. And Forge FC, it's not a big surprise. They're still leading the league in total possession, average possession per match at 56.5%. Vancouver, 38.2% possession. That is abysmal. I mean, and I get it. They're an expansion club. I know why they're abysmal, but it doesn't change the fact that they just are. That's just the reality. 38.2% possession is what they average. And Forge at 56.5. So if that doesn't paint the picture here, I'm not sure what to tell you. And I think we're gonna get more into this. Look, there was a part of me that feels a little bad because I do feel like I'm picking on them a bit, but I'm really these are just the stats. I mean, these are the facts. And again, we know why they're struggling. It is so difficult. You come into a league as an expansion club, you start from scratch. We're all aware of those challenges. But Caleb Irving, who, by the way, is a good goalkeeper, there's no question. However, he's playing on a bad team. And as a keeper, he's trying to do a little too much. That's what the numbers, that's what it looks like. Possession lost per game. Out of 50 players, there's only one goalkeeper on that list. Caleb Irving, on average, according, again, to SofaScore, Caleb Irving loses possession 18 times per match. The goalkeeper. Now, doesn't mean that he's getting, the ball stolen from necessarily all the time, but it means his passes. He's losing possession for his club 18 times per match. That is tied for first out of 50 players, and he's the only keeper. Again, there's a guy that's trying to do a little too much. And as you'd expect, he has also conceded the most goals per match at 2. By comparison, Tristan Henry, 1.2. So he's given up twice as many goals per match. Again, I feel a little, I don't want to pick on the guy, but that's just, these are the numbers. And again, it's not because he's a bad goalkeeper. It just means that he's on a bad team. And yeah, maybe he's doing a little too much. All right. That's enough. I'll get off Caleb Irving for a bit, although he is going to be part of the three keys. I'm sorry, Caleb, but listen, it's numbers. Okay. Let's get more into this match, more in depth. Mitchell Tierney from CanPL.ca actually covered the last Forge match against Pacific. He's also covered Vancouver FC this season, and he joins us right now on the match day preview. Well, Mitchell, you covered that Forge Pacific match. I mean, I know the word or the term statement game gets thrown around a lot, but I mean, this was a match for first place, and it was pretty decisive just from start to finish from the boys in orange.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, the match certainly took on a different profile a little bit later after the Gennaro Daniels injury, which, caused a big delay. Thankfully, he's doing all right. Sounds like just a minor concussion. So that's good news coming out of Pacific on that front. But, for the first part of the match, I think tactically, I think energy-wise, especially once they got that first goal, I think that kind of came as a bit of a sucker punch because Pacific actually came out quite well. That's been an issue for them lately. They really wanted to come out with energy. They were buzzing around a little bit, and then all of a sudden Forge go down the other way and score immediately. And I think after that, it was, like you said, all orange. But I think a statement match for Forge, considering, how good Pacific's been this year. What happened the last time the two sides played, and certainly where they want to be in the table.
It seems obvious, but it bears repeating. I mean, the first goal is just so key. It just completely changes the complexion. I mean, tactics change and just confidence changes. And yeah, it's just that first goal is huge. And as you mentioned, Forge scoring first, it looked like it completely changed the game.
Yeah, and 3 straight games now for them that they've scored first. That would have been a major issue up until that point. So it's something obviously they've wanted to work on and have gotten better at. And Bobby Smirniotis, one of his top 5 quotes is always goals change games. And you certainly saw that in this one. And, you see that throughout the season, just in the way different teams line up and play when they have the confidence of having scored first, especially a team like Forge, when they come out and score first, then they have the confidence to go. And, we saw this at York to score another and against Pacific to score 2 more, especially when you get one early. Against Valor, it was a little late, and then that left the opportunity for Valor to come back into it. But once you get a goal that early in a match, it always puts you in such nice control, especially when you're a team like Forge who just loves to have so much of the ball.
This next match for Forge now against Vancouver Friday night, it presents a few anomalies. I mean, first off, Forge has not been very good at home. At least the results haven't been there at home, which is a little surprising. And they've also, in 2 tries, they've never beaten Vancouver, which is also kind of surprising. So 2 kind of weird, odd storylines that don't seem to make sense going into this weekend.
Yeah, you look at almost all the factors surrounding this, and you'd think this would be one of the easier games in theory on Forge's schedule, but we all know there are no easy games in the Canadian Premier League. We've seen so many shock results this season, and probably one of the biggest would be, Forge going to Vancouver the last match and losing 2-0. But, I think they'll look at both of those matches and feel maybe like they did that to themselves a little bit. The first game, a 0-0 draw at home, they had a gazillion chances. We were both there in attendance. And, I think Jordan Hamilton missed a couple that you would fully expect him to put in. Woobens missed one 4 minutes in, and that was just kind of the story of that game. They'd also rotated that side pretty heavily, I think, as they were headed to Montreal in the Canadian Championship. And then you look at the next one where their own mistakes. You remember the Kane back pass certainly causing some issues there. That was kind of the big moment in that game. So I think Forge will go into this one knowing that if they execute and play their game, this should be a pretty good opportunity for them to pick up some important home points. And this is a match that if you're them right now, you kind of have to win if you want to keep this momentum going and to keep up the pace with those teams at the top. The Cavalries, even Pacific's still in there. These are teams that are all showing their ambition in recent weeks. So Forge will certainly want to stay with the pack in that regard.
Do we know what it's an expansion year? I mean, that's a challenge to just start a team from scratch. It's difficult for anybody, but has Vancouver carved out an identity yet, or are they still kind of searching for who they are?
I think they're really searching, and there are some new pieces recently, which I don't know if they help with the identity, but they certainly help them to be a more entertaining side. And some players that Forge fans will know very well. And last year's Golden Boot winner Alejandro Diaz, who had some big moments against Forge, and then Mickey Cantab, who scored that incredible goal in the opening game, I believe, of the season at Tim Hortons Field. So. Two exciting players that really add some quality to them. A big need for them as well. Number 6, Renan Garcia coming in, a very experienced player. Hadn't played in a couple of years before, or at least at a high level for a couple of years before coming to Vancouver. So there was some questions about what he might look like, but by and large, he's been pretty good. A player who, at 37 or whatever he is, maybe not the most mobile, and Forge's midfield might take advantage of that, but can ping a ball with the best players in the CPL. Will be someone to watch out for in terms of transitional moments. So I think that this will be a different, maybe Vancouver side to the one Forge fans have seen in terms of just their attacking side of play and the chances they can create. But at the same time, they just shipped 5 goals against Calgary. There's still some defensive concerns there. And they look kind of different every week at this point, both in terms of personnel and in terms of how they play.
This doesn't really relate to either club, but I was looking at the table and looking at it today, and I fully expected to see Ottawa making a jump because I feel like every time I look, they were just winning. I know they had to draw their last match, but they had a winning streak before that. And I look at the table and I think, what are they in 6th? Yeah, they're in 6th right now. And I was like, how have they not made up more ground? It really speaks to the league. You have an 8-team league. You have 28 matches. You have the clubs you're chasing, they're all playing each other. You have these 6-point swings. It really is difficult sometimes to gain ground. It's a funny league in that sense.
Well, I think if you'd looked the week before, they were up into 3rd place. So it's also just how close it is right now. And I think it was Austin Ricci of York who was saying after their win against Valor this weekend that it seems like right now, you string 3 wins together, you're in the top 2. You have 3 losses, you're 6th or what have you, which is exciting, as we enter the second half of the season. And we'll start to talk about, that new playoff format and all the different tiers that there are in terms of what the rewards are for finishing 5th through 1st place. And that's going to get exciting when it's so close, and every game towards the end of the season is going to matter, not just for that top spot and, that CONCACAF Champions League spot that everyone will want to lock up and regular season title, but also for all of the other playoff benefits and implications that come with the spots, as well as, just qualifying for the playoffs. There's 6 teams, especially right now, that look, like they're going to be in a real fight for that. So, it's very exciting, and it's what you want to see, certainly in the 5th year of this league.
And if you're Forge, you cannot afford to drop more points to Vancouver. I think it's safe to say. Mitchell Tierney, CanPL.ca, does amazing work for them. And also, for those of you not only listening but watching, also one of the better camera setups. You got the exposed brick, you got the books, you got plants. You've nailed the book. I know COVID, we're out of that, but you've nailed like the virtual meeting look. I love it.
Appreciate it. Yeah. Put a lot of work into the setup. So it's one of the first things when I moved into the new spot. I was like, got to find a nice little podcast setup here. Yeah. There's like a nice fireplace area. It's great. Make sure that's not turned on now that it's the summer. That'd be a little rough. But yeah, no, overall it's great.
Yeah, well, you said you put a lot of work into it. I heard you actually laid all that brick yourself, which is really impressive. Mitchell Tierney, all right, great work as always. It's always fun talking to you. Thanks so much. All right, time for 3 keys to the match for Forge FC hosting Vancouver at Tim Hortons Field in Hamilton. 7 o'clock Friday, forgefc.ca/tickets. Key number 1 for Forge, Spirit Breakers. I know it feels a little mean, but unfortunately, this is the environment we're working within. Forge is playing a vastly inferior expansion club. That's just the reality, which it has yet to defeat this season, by the way, after 2 tries. I feel like it is time to make a statement if you are Forge FC. You can't allow Vancouver to gain any confidence in this match. This needs to be a decisive, no-nonsense, spirit-breaking 3-point night for Forge. The club needs to score early, often. Remember that 4-0 rout over York a couple of weeks ago? I feel like we need another result against Vancouver. Let's just make a point. It's mean, but play these spirit breakers here. Key number 2 for Forge FC. Keep carving. Forge's efforts against Pacific, I said it earlier, it was just clinical. They took advantage of the smaller pitch by utilizing their quick ball movement, the Bobby ball approach that we've become accustomed to. Now, the way they've dissected clubs who've attempted to sit back in that low block and defend in recent weeks, it's been elite on Forge's part, and they have to stick with it. No complacency. Doesn't matter who the opponent is or what the scoreboard reads. It has to be muscle memory at this point. The fluidity, the almost robotic. It's just clinical. Bobby ball. It's a winning formula. There is very clear-cut evidence it's a winning formula, and they have to keep carving up those defensive looks because they're going to see a lot of it against Vancouver. Key number 3 for Forge FC. Hit them with the high press. Caleb Irving, I'm sorry. You're a solid goalkeeper, but you've been very busy this season trying to keep your expansion club afloat. And sometimes, I get it. He's trying to do a little too much, perhaps. According to SofaScore, Irving gives up possession 18 times per match on average. Not only is it tied for most in the CPL, he's the only keeper on the list of 50 players. Anytime Vancouver tries to build from the back, Forge needs to be on them with that aggressive high press of theirs. Mistakes will be made, allowing Forge to capitalize. Okay, that's it. We've said it all. There's nothing left except for this match to be played. Again, you can be there live, scoop up your tickets, witness perhaps the first ever victory against Vancouver FC at Tim Hortons Field Friday night. I will be there, and I hope to see you there.
Forge FC is prepared, and now you are informed. This has been Match Day Preview with Anthony Urciuoli on the Forge Audio Network. Subscribe on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts.